You guys, I am so excited to have our next guest back on. She's been on 2 times before in the heat of Scandival and really gave me a language and helped me understand the behavior that we were seeing on screen a little bit more. Because what's so great about reality television, folks, is that there's an enjoyment level. Sure, it's like watching a car crash, but we can look at overall patterns, themes, behavior, and relate that back to ourselves and what we're seeing, because we've all been in certain situations. Maybe you've gotten cheated on. Maybe you were the cheater. Maybe you've been emotionally abusive to somebody. Maybe you've been abused yourself. And I think these reality television at their best can show us things to do and not to do. So our next guest is an ex-forensic therapist where she did personality profiling, psych assessments for ex-cons, recently released from federal prisons. Her interest in neuroscience, neuroplasticity, and epigenetics led her to establishing her private practice in 2010, where she coaches executives and celebrities as an executive leadership coach and integrative health coach. You can find out everything about her at laurenclaytonhealth.com. I'll put that all in the show notes. And her
Lauren Clayton Total Health.
Lauren Clayton Total Health. I've already blown it, guys. Lauren Clayton Total Health .com, and her Instagram, which is awesome, is Mental Health Hacker. So without further ado, welcome back to the show, Lauren Clayton. Lauren, thank you so much for being back.
Nice to see you, Ryan. Thank you for having me back.
I always really love our conversations, and I always leave learning so much more than I knew before we talked. But I do also want to say up top is that we can't diagnose anybody. I especially can't. I don't have training, and I've sometimes learned the hard way over the years. Just because I have an opinion does not make it fact. Just because I think somebody has narcissistic tendencies does not, in fact, make them a narcissist. And Lauren, just to back up what we've said before, what is the proper way to have somebody diagnose somebody else? What's the actual way that you can get a diagnosis?
So all of the personality disorders, they're on a spectrum, and there's a thing called the DSM, which is a huge book of all the different, mental disorders, personality disorders, and they're clustered into certain that psychologists have just noticed. It's like, okay, these people that we're calling narcissists tend to display these things. It's all very common. These borderline people tend to do this. And borderline and narcissists tend to like each other, or covert and overt narcissists tend to like each other. But that's how it gets diagnosed. It's from the DSM actual definition of it, but it's really easy to look up. And there's a lot of wonderful literature and videos on YouTube where you could learn, or even on Instagram. It's really accessible now to learn about, instead of people that are victims of narcissistic abuse being so confused about what's going on. So, yeah.
Does the DSM get updated like on a daily basis? Because I feel like we find new things out about personalities all the time.
Absolutely. Not on a daily basis, but pretty regularly. I think yearly.
Wow. That just must be wild to have to keep up on, of what profession, what is out there? What are we, doing new terms for, like new behavioral patterns? And I would imagine, even thinking about reality shows, we have reality. I was thinking about, have we had any professional diagnoses on reality show stars themselves of like what being on TV does to somebody's personality? Because I feel like sometimes it brings out the worst in these people.
I think it's an amplifier, right? Between what you already have. And then I think there is a certain amount of playing to the camera too. But
Yeah.
what parts of your personality are you going to access and bring out? And also sometimes reality TV stars are put under a certain, kind of pressure or whatever. So if you have a narcissistic personality disorder or borderline, like, you're going to use certain tools or certain parts of your personality you're going to use when under stress that aren't pretty, you know what I mean? But a lot of people find them entertaining, and a lot of people relate to it. So, I mean,
but then you're rewarded for it too. In some ways, you make a living off it. So wouldn't that be reinforcing being rewarded for bad behavior?
In a way, I mean, I'm just thinking of a million examples, but yeah.
Let's use Jax Taylor.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, well, we could play the villain. Like, yeah, it is reinforcing it. And is it creating more of like the malignant behavior patterns? And yeah, if you're being rewarded for it, It is.
I'm telling you, this is a best-selling book. We got to write a book on reality stars and what this does to their brains. I mean, honestly.
Well, I mean, you're getting all these dopamine releases from a behavior that's kind of antisocial. So yeah, that could be problematic.
And then for us, we form these parasocial relationships, you know, as the viewer. And we saw with Scandival, it took on a whole new fervor because we felt like we were in that driver's seat with them, and we were yelling and screaming because we saw all this stuff and emotionally felt that. And I felt like the audience went through this roller coaster of emotions where all of a sudden the season ended and we're like, wait, there's not more. We need more. And we still had this same kind of fervor for any kind of information. And that's why I think we see every piece of season 11, which they're filming now, being filmed and shown to us in like Instagram clips.
Oh my gosh, there's so much. Well, first of all, the pain of a breakup, of being cheated on, we've all been there. And it's like inconsolable sometimes, right? And so to watch that, and then I was talking, I think on the first time I was on your show, I was talking about like the psychological phenomenon that happens where it's actually kind of comforting as an audience member to watch it. And you get these like serotonin, oxytocin releases, and you do really feel connected to them, you know, because it's something you've been through, or you in a way kind of over-identified with whomever is your favorite or not, right? And so there's that. And then also you're watching people and how they deal with it. And it does something like it gets you hooked. And it's kind of like we needed more. It's like very similar to like a drug addiction.
Yes.
It's like,
you got any more of that? I need that Scandival. I need that Scandival. Like it is true. And, you know, because then, like, you know, we see this, and I was talking to you before we started here with Raquel Rachel. We left off really, you know, by the way, we're going to talk about a lot of pop culture and things like this, but I just wanted to start with Scandival. We left off with Raquel Rachel, like potentially checking herself into a mental health facility where she has stayed for many months. I believe she got out a couple of weeks ago. And there's a big question if she's going to film or not. A lot of people are saying no, but we see Tom Sandoval out here. You know, he didn't go to a mental health facility. He went on tour with his band, and we see him puffed up chest. He seems very prideful. You would not be able to tell. I would think logically, I just thought like, well, when I've really messed up, I hang my head down. I don't want to be seen. I get really like, and I've messed up, and like, I get really, I don't want to be out there. What is this? Why do men, like, it seems like, okay, whatever you think about Rachel, she actually potentially did something for her mental health, if that is to be believed. But Tom has potentially done no work on himself. Why is it maybe that women tend to tend to try to work on themselves more than men? Because it just seems like Tom it's not even a speed bump.
Well, I think that there's a couple things there. Let's just take ostensibly how it looks. So because Raquel's a woman, Rachel, whatever she's going by now, is a woman, she's like deemed a slut and all of these things, and like evil, and like, I mean, she was friends with, I don't know.
There are things that are bad that she, obviously, yes.
Yeah. And so I think that people are going to maybe look down on her more, and then all of those, like that aspect of it. And then to answer your question, I do think that women, I think, process and grieve at an accelerated rate compared to men typically, because they get to talk to their girlfriends, and it's okay to be really open about your feelings and emotions from a young age. And, you know, we're socialized that way. And so you can, you know, psychologically, you know, and emotionally advance and heal a lot more. Now, with this specific situation, because, you know, he's a narcissist. I believe that he exhibits a lot of narcissistic tendencies. And this is one of them. It's like, okay, well, instead of dealing and healing and doing that stuff, no, I'm just going to go out because they need so much adulation and praise and all this. So he's going out to get it. And he's like, okay, I need someone to tell me I'm not bad. And so I need to go out on stage and have people yell my name and give me all types of, because that's what they need when they never admit that they have done anything wrong. In this case, I thought, you know, a lot of his stuff was fake and like trying to be, you know, contrite about. I thought it was very staged. We talked about that last time. But and just trying to garner sympathy. And that's exactly what they do. It's creepy. They're like, and then if they know it's not working, they just shut it off, but they just don't want to take responsibility for it. So now this is his next step. And that is like, okay, let's pretend like nothing happened. And I need some attention and praise. So that's what he's doing.
Do we sometimes as a society though, I mean, I find it interesting that like we don't want to ever be wrong. I mean, obviously that's a natural thing to not want to do something bad or be relegated as somebody that is a bad person. But I would argue that potentially, like, isn't that the greatest learning experience ever? Is that if we're able to like go, yeah, that was a bad thing, but I'm not a bad person and I want to work towards getting better. Why don't we sometimes have, is it lack of bravery? Like what stops us? Is it self-preservation?
Well, it takes a lot of courage. It's not easy to look at these things, but it's worth it, because you can either have that pattern and keep repeating it, and then it usually gets worse and worse and worse till you really hit rock bottom. Or you could look at a situation and say, okay, well, I'm not proud of myself. And we all have a past. We all have things that we're not proud of. But yeah, it takes a little bit of humility and courage to be like, okay, I want to change. And especially when you haven't had a situation where you bottomed out. Like for me, what happened to Raquel, that's like a complete bottom. Like I would just, yes, I would go to a mental health facility and like for a year and just really, that's personally what I would do. But if like, she's probably had that behavior pattern for a while, right? It didn't just, I don't think this is just like magically like a oops situation. She's probably that's typically what happens. So yeah, it takes courage to do that. And I always am recommending to people, like, do it before it gets really bad. And then like do the work on yourself, like do the shadow work, do coaching or therapy or whatever it is. But yeah, it does take courage. And this is why people don't do it. This is why people jump into a new relationship or just, start drinking or some addictive or compulsive behavior, because it's like, I want to numb out for as long as I can instead of temporarily being in pain, just a little bit of pain. Because and like some people really do, especially narcissists, they have a very, like, I don't want to say immunity, but it's really hard for them to feel any type of shame or guilt. There's something called narcissistic annihilation, and they will literally feel like they're being annihilated. And so it's really difficult for them. Now you can still work on it, because narcissism is not like genetic or anything. So you can work on it if you're a narcissist or borderline, but there's just no willingness to. And then there's so many people willing to enable that type of behavior and that type of personality.
Well, I mean, I love how we go through life, and I always notice, especially with reality shows, if we keep using this as an example, is that half the people realize, like, come on, he's totally lying. And half the people buy everything that they're seeing and going, no, I believe, like they say, like, well, everybody's telling the truth on these shows. Like, there really is a good segment of the audience that believes everything that they are told. And then there's a good half of the audience that watches these through these skeptical lenses because they've experienced these people in real life. And I always find that fascinating that most people still don't expect to be lied to. So they don't know if somebody's lying to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think people want to believe that everything is real.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thought, right? Like we do want to believe sometimes. I mean, it's a horrible thought to believe that the wool is being pulled over our eyes at any time. That takes a lot of acceptance. And also there's like a fall from grace that I feel like we feel when we realize that there's more to things than just what we see in the immediate moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And, people are complex and layered. And
not me, Lauren. I am not complex. I am very, very standard. I'm joking.
Most people. and so yeah, you could, no one's all good or all bad, right?
Yeah.
And even though if you're more on the borderline side of things, you think in black and white terms, and so people are good or bad, but no one is all good or all bad. We all have our shadows, and hopefully we're all working on ourselves in a genuine way to evolve and get better. But
we know that's not the case, or at least I believe we are not all working on ourselves. And okay, so last thing about Vanderpump, if they came to you right now, Lauren, and said, hey, we are looking for a coach right now to film to work with Tom Sandoval. First off, would you even dare do that? And second off, where would you start with somebody like Tom?
Well, with anyone, I always say, I'm here if you're willing. You know, the willingness has to be there. With narcissists that I've worked with, they're either, you know, more high functioning, or they do my favorite is the spiritual narcissist. Yes. I'm ready. They're the worst. But so there's usually not a willingness, but or it's for show. It's to gain some type of I've had narcissists like try to like make me like them, and I'm like, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to, you know, you're trying to impress me or whatever you're trying to do. That's not. So it's really hard for them to actually do the work, is what I'm saying. They'll do it to please or placate a situation or to look good.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm always open to helping people that are willing to actually do the work, because then nothing gets done. And then what would I do with Tom?
Yeah. How do you start with how do you start with a client? How would you even start? And especially since you've seen the show, how would you even begin to start?
Well, with someone like that, and typically I'm like, okay, well, why are you here? Why do you think you're here? How have you disappointed people? Which is a hard one for them. Have you disappointed yourself? What do you do to cope with that? You know, yeah.
Well, now I want this to happen. Now I really want the answers to these questions. I want, because these are the questions that I think a lot of us want to know. Like, I would love, like, I'm willing to, like, I want to know what he thinks, but I would want to know honestly, and we could just not guarantee that.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, but there's a way to dissect, because then they start presenting and showing and kind of performing in a way. Typically, especially if a camera was there, I think they'd be really like, either like, oh my God, I've healed, and and it's like, well, shit, no, you didn't. It's real, because what you did was go on tour. What's that about? You know?
Yeah.
And so there's a way to break that down. I mean, I would get out like forensic psychologist Lauren, like when I was working with And I still do that in my practice sometimes too. I'm like, okay, listen, like your bullshit isn't working. I get kind of real. And so sometimes it depends. Like everyone is so different. Like I feel like you're doing a dance with someone when you're talking to them. So when you and it's another reason I don't practice traditional therapy, because it's like, do this like protocol. It's like, no, everyone is so different. You have to be present and like with someone and in their energy and understand to like navigate and like which question, but not having, you know, sat with him before, that's kind of like what comes to mind first.
Has that always been the attraction for you for this type of work, is that everything is different and each person is, and it's a dance of trying to figure out the best way to help anyone?
Yeah. I mean, I love watching people heal and grow and transform, especially when they're like in the depths of despair or never thought they would have the life that they have now. And so, I mean, especially my clients are on freaking fire right now. I'm like so happy and proud of them. And so I love that feeling. And I love like connecting with someone's soul and being like, okay, because I really do feel like we're all here for something, for greatness. And it's like, whatever your greatness is, let's do it. And yeah, my whole thing is thriving in your health, wealth, relationships, career, like every level, because they're all interconnected. So I love it.
God, that's so exciting. Okay, so you mentioned something that I find interesting in terms of Rachel Raquel, is that, you know, this was a pattern of behavior. This probably is not the first time. And by the way, if you look at the history of her relationships with DJ James Kennedy, you can make the argument there's a definite pattern here. Somebody else who their pattern has been highlighted over this last month is the pop singer legend Ariana Grande, who has recently filed for a divorce from Dalton Gomez, her husband, and now has paired up with her Wicked co-star. They're filming a movie together. Ethan Slater, I believe, is his name. And they are now together, and he was in a relationship with a newly born child who was like a year old, I believe. And we then go back, because the internet is great this way, is that Ariana Grande had this pattern of behavior with a bunch of men, Pete Davidson, Mac Miller, rest in peace. There was a lot of people where they were all in previous relationships, and she got them potentially that way as well. What are your thoughts overall when you see something like this? Because I was I really was shocked.
Oh, yeah. No, it's really, first of all, There's like, and she got him, this new one, she got him at a, like kind of at the right time. I hate saying this, but it is true. Traditionally, when men cheat the most is when a child is born and when a child dies. That's when men cheat the most.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
And so, and when a child is born, there's so much going on. It's not about you, and there's just it's a mess, right? So it's like, fine, but you don't like up and leave your wife, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, like what must be going through a man's mind when he's, like that's just, you would think that's the obvious. He must, it's like you're like poisoned in your mind because that's not clear thinking.
Yeah. And so like with relationship hoppers in general, as I call them, or serial monogamous, but especially and they're always in a relationship, and then they start to, groom another one and then cheat. And then it's just what they do. And it is a compulsion, and it is an addiction. There's usually like a comorbidity, meaning two things are happening at once between like borderline personalities or narcissistic personalities and what's called sex and love addiction. And so both, like typically like a narcissist or borderline also has sex and love addiction. And so this pattern, and that's a sex and love addiction is a real thing. There is really a 12-step program for it called SLAW, sex and love addiction. It's like a real thing.
It's called SLAW?
Well, it's called SLAW for short.
I was like, we need a better, let's let a slaw, just like, let's get some of that slaw in here. Okay, slaw.
Yeah. So I feel like she's exhibiting a lot of those behaviors, and you do get the rush, like you get the dopamine, and there's an adrenaline and all the things because you're doing something you're not supposed to, and then there's a lot of love bombing going on from the person that's like initiating typically, and also because narcissists and borderline they like love bombing. It's like the biggest high, and we all like. The first part of a relationship is always nice and everything, but they take it to another level. And so what people like this tend to do is become like a fantasy of whatever that guy, whatever in this case, wants. And then layered with a lot of love bombing. And I'm like, this is so intense and this is meant to be. And oh my God. And then the other person really believes it. And it's like a drug. And in the most like literal sense, because your brain is like, I think it's your pineal gland is like a drugstore. It is the most like potent like drugstore. And then, that's secreting all these hormones. So you really are high and you really are addicted to this and you really are caught up in it. It's just like when you see an alcoholic or someone that's on drugs and they go off and do some crazy shit and you're like, oh my God, you're like under the influence. So both these people are very like under the influence of this like chemical pattern. That's going.
And then obviously then I would be wondering when they're going to wake up with that hangover, because eventually that has to leave you. And I do wonder though, for somebody like Ariana Grande is, because she is a celebrity, so many people have dissected all of her previous relationships where a lot of this stuff, this isn't the first time it's been said in regards to Ariana Grande. And you guys, I'm not talking about her talent at all. I'm talking about her in relationships, that she would have to be or have some small awareness of her patterns in relationships, right? Because you use the word grooming, but like you would never want to think that Ariana Grande is out there going, I'm grooming another one. Like how self-aware do you think people like this are relationship to relationship?
I don't. I think right now, in a lot of ways, it's working for her, right? If you keep doing a behavior, and that's another thing I always, when I'm initially working with someone, because they're coming in hot and they're like, oh my God, da, da, da. And I'm like, you have this in your life because there's something about it that's working for you. There's something about it that's comfortable. And so unless there's some kind of like rock bottom thing, she doesn't seem embarrassed about, I don't think there's any like negative consequences for her right now.
Well, all of us are like talking smack about it. I feel like the internet, if you ignore the internet, I guess, if you're locked into the internet, that seemed to be all the conversation of like, oh my God, she did it again. And also what an asshole this guy was, because his wife came out and was like, no, we're not releasing a co-statement. And no, I am going to talk to the press because this is totally like they went out to dinner together, like the four of them when they were in different couplings. Like she was liking their Instagram posts of them with the baby. Like that's wild. Like, wouldn't you stop yourself?
That's so.
but why don't we stop her? Like, this is beyond the pale of like awful. Like, why would I ever, like, whether he loves his wife or not is not my business. I'm not going to be the one. Like, I just like, how deeply do these people feel that they're in love that they think it's okay to push for this sort of behavior? Because he's an obvious piece of shit as well. Sorry, I know that's not professional. That's not a professional term.
No, but I'm saying I do think that she and maybe him too, like really believe that this is it and we're just in love and no one understands. Like they're really under the influence, think about it like an alcoholic with alcohol. Like it's the same thing. And it's just like, oh, I can control my drinking. You don't it's like, no, you can't. And this isn't like, she's using relationships just like an alcoholic or drug addict uses their substance of choice. Like it's just substance abuse, but with people. And so like when you're in it, you just don't care about anything else, right?
And if it's all you know, if it's all you know, then this is like business as usual. Like you're not, is there a possibility that she's like, well, this is how relationships go because it's all the relationships I've had is some sort of like somebody hopping from one relation to the next. So this is kind of normal.
I don't know if I think that she knows it's not normal, but I don't think that there's a lot of, awareness or like caring, you know what I mean? There's no, I don't see a big willingness to change. I don't see any type of like caring. I think that she's just plowing through literally and doing her thing, so.
That, is the ego's got to be involved a lot there as well. The ego of like, well, I don't care. I want what I want. The heart wants what it wants. I think for somebody like Ethan, though, the gentleman in this, wouldn't you then like do a cursory search on the internet and go, hey, real quick question. It seems like I don't want to go out of bounds here. It seems like you've done this in every other relationship potentially. I'm a little nervous on my end. Like, how is he?
I've changed. I'm a different person now. Like literally that's what they say. I dated one of these and he literally broke up with his fiance over the phone and it's on the internet. Right. And so
he broke up with his fiance on the internet?
No, he broke up with his fiance by calling her.
Okay.
Like, just like, yeah, I'm not into this.
I thought you meant he filmed it. I thought you meant he filmed him doing it. I was like, damn.
No. He got engaged really quickly and then like dumped her over the phone. And then so we're dating and it's like, I love you. Oh my God, I'm going to marry you and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, so you're about your fiance. Like, oh, I've changed since then. And I'm like, no, you haven't. Like you haven't though. And so it's just, and like, oh no, but they really, and I do think that guy believed maybe he did. And then, when I broke up with him, I'm like, you are not doing any work on yourself. Like your mental health hygiene is like gross. It's like you need to be cleaned out and like actually do. And so, yeah, unless they get like really heartbroken or something like makes them look within, they're just going to keep doing it. They're just like really. And then so when we broke up, he was immediately like trying to get back with his ex and everything. And like, yeah, so that's just how these people roll. And it's like, because it's like, they're trying to numb out with a relationship with another person. That's just what they do. Like not, when you break up and you might like drink a little bit more or like, do something like your heart or eat cake or I don't know, like some like behavior like that. They just go to another person and that is how they numb out. And usually the pattern gets worse and worse and worse until something really bad happens.
How are any of us in relationships? Like, I don't even know. Like, it just seems like just the amount of things that you're potentially putting in your way all the time. Like, how are any of us it just seems wild to think about when you're dealing with a whole nother person that is not you and to try to keep up. I don't know. It's just wild. So I find the Ariana Grande thing fascinating, but then also in terms of, I was reading a post of yours about toxic relationships. And then I was also thinking about the Kardashians because this season they had I believe it was season 3 of the Hulu show, which I loved. A lot of you guys just hate them so much, but I think it's fascinating because it's so much behavior on screen and then adding billions of dollars on top of it. I just find it so intriguing in so many ways. But you could argue at the end of this season, you guys, if you haven't watched it, Tristan's mother passes away. which is tragic. And Chloe and Chris and Kim immediately hop on Kim's private jet and go take care of everything. Chloe moves Tristan and his disabled brother in with them, which is a beautiful thing. But now they're kind of together all the time. It seems like I've always had this question about Kardashian relationships. All the men seem potentially toxic in their lives. Can you speak to that at all? Does that ring true for you when I say any of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. The post I did I think you're talking about is that like these unresolved or unhealed things from childhood, or especially things with our parents that we don't like or we have a problem with consciously or unconsciously, we attract in our relationships. And so, and that's like Chloe with the cheating. And, but the theme I've always seen with the Kardashians, and I like the Kardashians, I like the show, is that there's this like codependency, and they talk about it a lot, but like they talked about it a lot this season about like they all have these like codependent tendencies, especially with their men. So they're attracting like narcissists or people that need to be taken care of. I mean, Chloe like point blank said it. She's like, I'm a nurturer. I like taking care of blah, blah, blah. And then, but also is frustrated by a lot of Tristan's behaviors. And like, there's, you know, like when they were dating, it felt like there was like a lot of breadcrumbing. Like she barely got any, like she got this like one gift from him, and she was like, oh my God, you got me a gift. And it was like this, it was just, you know, there's just a lot of that. I'm like thinking of a million examples at once. But, and then like with Kanye and the fallout and everything, and that is like, you know, you really see like Kim recovering from like all that narcissistic abuse, but you become, I don't think you can become it, or you do become it, but like, I think you attract like a narcissist like that when you have codependent tendencies. And she said like, I was always cleaning up messes and like just completely like draining herself to take care of him, you know? And then
not knowing what's going to, you know, always looking over your shoulder potentially, because you don't know when the next outburst is going to happen. And also Kim, I mean, you know, she has, I would imagine, certain narcissistic tendencies as well. I mean, not on the scale of a Kanye, because I believe Kanye, we go into more of a real mental health thing where there's a difference in terms of day to day. But, you know, we've seen Kim, you know, we see that fight with Kim and Courtney this season, just over you stole my Italian wedding and you stole Andrea Bocelli. And you're just like, oh my God, this is crazy. You guys are like, these are like $1 million fights, but they're still happening. So I find Kim especially fascinating because she is trying to do the right things for her and her kids, but also try to still hit that button of wanting to be the #1 star in the world.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, in a lot of respects that she is. And then, but let me talk about the Dolce Gabbana thing. Okay, that was ridiculous. First of all, like she was just like, you stole my whatever it is. You don't own Dolce and Gabbana, by the way. And if you wanted to, I mean, she could have like put together some type of deal like Kim did for her wedding, which would have been, I'm sure the wedding is already a tax write-off because it's like being filmed, but like she could have had a bigger tax write-off from like, but you didn't think to do that, Courtney, because you're not business-minded. And then you resent your sister who is very business-minded. And
that's all she is. That's all she is.
Like, this is like, you know, if I was sitting with them and like doing like a whatever, because I do this a lot with clients. So like, let's say Courtney's going off. Well, Kim is like in, I think it's like the last episode, she sits on her phone with her notes and she's just like delineating all the things that she doesn't like about Kim. And
you guys, they're sitting on this massive bed. They have to film this scene, and it's Chloe, Courtney, and Kim. And Courtney's like, I thought a lot about our last argument, and I wrote down some notes about, you know, like what I think could help you. And it's literally just all of the things she doesn't like about Kim. And Kim has to sit there and listen to it. And you can tell Kim is inside seething, but she's like, thank you. I will take that into consideration. And
but she also says, yeah, that's me. And it's not you. And like, I mean, I don't know if maybe it's unconscious, like resentment that Courtney has towards Kim because like Kim is more accomplished. And like, you know, and then Courtney's like, it's just really important to be yourself. And I'm like, no shit, Courtney, it is. And I'm like, just fucking admit it. Like, you wouldn't have the life that you have without your sisters. And you just want to be taken care of. Like, she's always wanted to, like, you know, she's been the least ambitious one. I think that she just wanted a housewife, like housewife
Which
life.
there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
But just admit it, and just admit that you're not like Kim, and that's okay, you know?
I think it's a hard pill to swallow when you feel like somebody is taking, you know, like all of the oxygen in the room. I always think about Anthony Frankel right now is that she feels like there's some empty part of her that needs to fill it with everything. And sometimes Kim, I know, can like just monopolize, but she's built like that. This has been her dream since day one. And every episode of the Kardashians, like I always say, is like some Make-A-Wish Foundation for Kim, because it's a new height she's going to. And then you go to Kourtney, and of course she has the Travis relationship, which is amazing, but she's like, I guess I'm going to do some gummies. Here's my matcha gummies. And like, it's not ever as successful as Kim.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's just like this resentment that she's projecting on to, and then under the guise, under like the cloak of like being like this martyr, like, you guys care, or she just is all about the money and I'm not. And I'm like, bitch, like where you're sitting in your like mansion, like it makes no. And by the way, because at one point your sister was essentially a porn star, and like that's how this all like really started, like you have this life, you know? And so it's kind of like, it makes no sense. And it's like, and then Kourtney talked about this too, is that like, oh my God, my gummies, and I'm just so proud of myself. It's like, yeah, it feels good to accomplish something career-wise, and sorry you haven't done more of it or on the level that Kim has, but like, you can't like get upset at something, like try harder, just do your thing.
I just always think it's fascinating, though. You know, we always like these are supposed to be aspirational figures in terms of their wealth and their looks. But in the end of the day, they're still fighting over the same stupid bullshit that all of us fight over it. Like all of these stupid family relationships that we have that aren't all good. Like you can see, like when that happens, I'm like, oh, like families, you know, it is just funny. It just, because they have more doesn't mean they have everything. It doesn't mean that they have all their relationships figured out, because they obviously don't. And I always just find that it just seems like it's more of everything. And yeah, they might be able to wear nice leathers and get the nice procedures, but at the end of the day, they are just as messed up, if not more, than a lot of us are. Like it is like, I can't imagine every day Kim waking up still to this day, not knowing what Kanye will do next. You know, I know he's now married to Bianca Censori, and they're wearing some very interesting fashions overseas, but she even talks about in this season of the Kardashians that this is always something that fascinates me, that she has kept this from all of her kids. She's done an amazing job. She says they don't know. I always champion their dad, which, yeah, on its face is amazing. But I don't have kids, so I can't speak to this. But I do sometimes say like, yeah, but they're going to see this show one day and obviously see that you said all of this stuff. Like we all know. So they're essentially these kids living in some kind of Truman Show reality that we all know. And we're watching when they find out, because Kim has manipulated their teachers. Manipulation is the wrong word. She's told their teachers don't say anything. She's told their friends, but they've created a society through social media, because I do think they are one of the originators of getting social media as big as it is, that it's going to get back to these kids one day. In terms of kids, I don't know if you do any work with children or have ever studied, like, what do these kids have to look forward to when they, I mean, kids can probably pick up on the energy of their dad already, but what, I mean, is Kim doing a potential disservice in not being, I don't know, like it's such a sensitive topic, but like, how do you start to share with family that one of your family members is potentially has mental health needs mental health help sometimes more than some of us in terms of medicine and things like that?
Well, with kids, it is tricky, and the protocol is to not say anything. And then if you do, and you talk too much shit about your former spouse or whatever, it's called parental alienation. And it's a real thing, because it's a form of like abuse to the child to do that. And then when a child hears bad things about their parent, like coming from another parent especially, but the child like internalizes that, because it's like, well, these are my protectors, or people that are supposed to care about me, and I'm, associated, they're my parents, so that means something bad is like, I'm bad. And so it creates this false narrative around I'm bad, and then shame, and then it, that goes into adulthood, and that's a whole other thing. So you never want to talk shit about it. And I mean, I'd probably do the same thing to the extent that I could with my kids to protect them from that. But and I tell this to, parents that I have when one parent is so narcissistic, I'm like, let them play themselves out. I know it's so hard. I know you want to do all this stuff, but kids are so smart. And if they have one that is stable, all you have to do is keep being stable and secure and
play the long game,
and then they'll figure it out. And then figure it out really fast, because kids are so smart. And especially as they get older and they start to individuate and they're like, no, fuck that. I don't like that parent anymore. And, kids in general have to do that anyway, but it gets more intense. I'm like, play the long game. It will all work out in your favor.
But that's for kids also, that all makes complete sense. But then you throw a reality show and a public persona into the mix. Mm-hmm. And where does that take kids? Because, North has grown up waving to paparazzi to now she'll be like, it's enough, pop. This is a 9-year-old girl that she is now more familiar with a bunch of flashes of cameras than any of us would be at any age. And I just wonder how that plays a role as well. And we don't know the answer to that because only few people will ever have to deal with that. I just wonder what part of that is going to play into all of this as well, because everything has been so documented. We have film on everything. We have every one of Kanye's outbursts. We have even to take it back to Kim's video that got released, initially with Ray J, it's all there. And by the way, I'm one of those people that I don't care how Kim got to where she got, personally. I think it's truly amazing and should be studied in terms of how she turned that into this is just mind-boggling, and I think it'll be studied for generations to come. But it's something that I think about a lot of just how are those kids going to deal? We even see a little bit with Jada Pinkett and Will Smith's kids is that they seem very, by the way, did you see that article of Jada Pinkett Smith that Jaden said, yeah, my mom, we all do mushrooms together, or she was the one that introduced me to mushrooms?
Okay. I'm all for your kids but I don't think have good boundaries, with.
Well, I heard the mushroom thing and I was like, that makes complete sense. Now I understand why. I can understand.
I'm not going to read a parenting book anytime soon from them. And then and then what's the girl's name? Jaden?
Jada Pinkett Smith is and then Willow is the daughter.
Willow.
Willow.
The times I've seen her on Red Table Talk, it's kind of there's just this sense of entitlement. Of course you want your children to have a voice, but there's some lack of social skills and understanding social cues because of whatever kind of parenting was going on. And it's I'm not a big fan of, and no, I don't have kids either, but I just, this is kind of basic one-on-one. Your kids aren't your friends when you're raising them. They're not your friends. They're not your buddies. And so, the boundaries, there's a lot of enmeshment there that feels very not healthy and uncomfortable.
Yeah. I know we weren't even planning on talking about this, but now it just popped into my head. But I was thinking about I was reading this book the other day about the Oscars, and they were talking about the slap with Will Smith and Chris Rock. And I remember that night, Jaden Smith wrote on Twitter, that's how we do it. Oh, you step to us, you're going to get smacked. But that moment was so huge and so big. And I was just I will always think about what, the most pressure of that man's life of winning the Oscar as also one of the only African men, there's a group of 10 men that have done it previously, what a big moment for him. He's worked his whole career to get to this moment. And then Chris Rock makes a G.I. Jane bald joke about Jada Pinkett Smith. And he broke in that moment, or whatever was going on in his head, to the point where on national television that's beamed into so many different countries, goes up and smacks Chris Rock and then sits down and everybody talks to him and waits an hour and a half later to get the Best Actor Oscar and go up and make a speech. And I just think of what a huge moment and what that does to a mind and what could have possibly snapped in him in that moment. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I know that you might not even have anything to say. That's a moment that just fascinates me psychologically.
The impulse control level was low, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
And when that initially happened, there was a lot of, well, with some of the people that I follow that thought that was like some narcissistic abuse, like Jada is like narcissistic, and then she made Will do, like, I don't know. I mean, maybe she is or whatever. And so sometimes with, if you're in a narcissist or in a relationship with the narcissist, like you get kind of forced to do situations like that. But I mean, it really kind of took away from everything. And it just felt like a way to kind of sabotage yourself more than anything.
The biggest moment of your career potentially. Mm-hmm. And then you put it with now a moment that will be talked about in every article that you ever do for the rest of your life. That footnote will be there. And I just find it, what an interesting moment on a world stage. Back to reality shows and behavior. I've been thinking a lot about grief lately. And I've been experiencing grief myself. And have you ever watched a reality show or anything comes to your mind where you're like, this is a good representation of grief? This just popped into my head, but I was wondering, we always see like the cheating? We always see all of this stuff, but have we seen examples of grief? Would one of those be what Ariana was going through at the end of this season of Vanderpump?
And then, one thing that came to mind when we're talking about the relationship hoppers and like all of that, it's an inability to process grief. Actually, it's like, I mean, there's a lot to that, but one of the things is like that there's kind of like an intolerance to processing any type of grief. It's too painful to look at, so they numb with a new relationship. But have I seen examples of processing grief well on reality TV?
Yeah, I mean, does anything come to your mind like that? I was just trying to think of like, human behavior, and grief is something that we all go through. And have we seen any ways? I was trying to even think just really quickly about Kardashians, because we've seen so much trauma go through that show. Yeah. I mean, all of these shows are based on some form of trauma. I'm just wondering if we've ever seen somebody deal with actual grief. I mean, we've seen people die on these shows. I was thinking back to Real Housewives of Beverly Hills with Taylor Armstrong's husband, who unalived himself. And then she came back for that season, and we watched her go through that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think that she did the best that she could with the grief. And it also made her whole situation like a lot more real, because then we got to see what was really going on. And grief can really do that. It can strip away facades, especially facades that aren't working for you, or, just leading to like more malignant behavior patterns. It could really strip that away. The Taylor, that's a good example. And then with death, I thought it was really nice how they came together to help Tristan with, just like cleaning up
the family when his mom passed.
Because you do want that. You want to be with community, and you want to just help each other in a situation like that. And they really came together. They put everything, whatever they thought about Tristan, to the side, and it's like, okay, we're family, and so we're going to do this. So I thought that was a good example. And then with like Kim grieving her relationship, and she talks about it. I thought it was a good example of like grieving a narcissistic, like leaving a narcissist and recovering from narcissistic abuse, because you're grieving like the person you lost, like, because you really have to abandon yourself in so many ways to be with a narcissist. Like, she became this beige like entity, and like there's no like, Kim's never going to be like wallpaper in the background, but like inside everything, like only wear beige and like only like, I
didn't even think about that. Yeah.
She really like thought that her favorite color was beige, and like in this season she has like lime green nails on that are all long, and like she's just really like coming into her own. But she keeps saying it like, I'm like grieving this relationship. This man that I fell in love with, this is not Kanye, and it is like I'm actually building a course on this, like recovering from like a narcissistic relationship and narcissistic abuse, and like the grieving aspect of it, because you fell in love, like the narcissist, the love bomber, or like this happens with relationship hoppers too. The phases are love bombing, which is also known as idealization, which is where love bombing can happen. So it's like they idolize, like, you are the most amazing, and it feels really good. It's like,
but do they really feel that in the moment of love bombing? They're like, you really are the most amazing?
They say that. They're like, oh, at the time I meant that. Now go away. And then and they're like, oh my God, and da da da. I'm like, you're just the most amazing person I've ever met, and I'm gonna love, and I'm gonna whatever. That's the idealization phase. Then it goes into devaluing. So it's like nitpicking about things that you think that, and they don't even have to be real. A lot of the times with narcissists, they don't even nitpick and start to criticize things that are real, which goes into the gaslighting. So that's the devaluation stage. And then the discarding, like just an abrupt breakup, go away, like just like a really like abrupt and sad like breakup. And then there's another the last phase is hoovering. And not all narcissists, some of them just discard and they get in a new relationship, but a lot of them do what's called hoovering, which is like stalking, like internet stalking or stalking in person, or just like hoovering over it, like making sure, trying to like, I mean, it could get
wait, Lauren, I feel like I have a lot of, and I hate to, like, female friends that hoover, because I've seen them like, oh, I found this on this, or they're putting together these internet pieces, but I don't consider them doing some of the other things, but they're definitely hoovering, because I'm in conversation with girls all the time that say they do this.
No, but it's more intense. It's like trying to like get someone's like ID, like their like PIN number, or like breaking into their email, like things that are kind of like not legal. It's like this obsession about the other person that they, just dumped. And so usually the phase starts again. They get in contact with the person during the hoovering phase. And then it's like the idealization again. That person's like getting addicted to that. Then the devaluation, then the discarding again. And so that cycle keeps going. And so like Kim was like really grieving all of that, because that high of like the person that just was like really swept you off your feet and everything. And like, it's like, no, I want that to be real. I want that to be who you really are. And when in fact you have to have an acceptance, which is part of the grieving process, an acceptance that is not, the man you fell in love with is not who he really is. That's what he did to lure you in. But
that's why I think it's interesting to choose Pete Davidson after that, because, there's little similarities in terms of ego, but it's not Kanye. And in fact, it must have been a shock. And she talked about this on season 2 of like, yeah, we would just like watch TV and like be in bed and watch TV. Like it was like a foreign concept to her that you could watch TV in bed. And then she's like, I fell asleep and he put pimple cream on me, which I don't even know if that's true or not, but she seemed legitimately shocked that people could do things like watch TV together, which I was like, yeah, because of course, if you're with Kanye, if you're watching TV, you're probably watching TV together on a private jet on the way to Japan, like the biggest form of watching TV that you ever could. And that's not the reality of life. So how do you come back as anybody after you've experienced such a damaging relationship that had beautiful moments, but damaging? How do you get your brain to come back to some stasis level where you could potentially have a normal relationship when you don't even know what a normal relationship is anymore?
Yeah. I mean, and that's something too, because with narcissists, everything is overdone and it's ostensibly like, oh, look, I'm doing this for you, but it's like they're doing it for them, so they could fall in love with themselves and so that they look amazing and all of those things. And so, yeah, and it's like part of it is exciting, but part of it is also draining. There's just something about like narcissistic energy where it's like they're just draining. And so, yeah, I'm sure it was really nice to just like lay in bed and do that, and it was probably just refreshing.
It was fun for a night or two. It was like, let's work now. Let's get back to work. Do you have a little bit more time? Are you in a rush? Okay. This made me, we were talking about this and then all of a sudden this popped into my head, and I don't know if you were familiar with this at all, so you might not be. Did you read any of those Jonah Hill text messages to his ex? I was thinking about toxic relationships. And here's somebody, you guys, I think we've talked about this on the show before, but Jonah Hill's ex finally released all this trove of text messages, which I don't know how, I feel about releasing text, but whatever. But it was very therapized because he's done a lot of therapy or quote unquote work on himself. And did you did read these?
Yeah, I did. And I mean, again, speaking of people that display narcissistic characteristics, yes, there's a lot of that. It felt like gaslighting. It felt like he was making himself the victim. It it was hard to read, but.
And there were like demands. He was like, if you want to do this, if you want to do this, if you want to do this, I do not want to be a piece of that, and I will respect your wishes. But it was like presented in such a way that he was in the right, and he had therapy language to back him up, and she is in the wrong, and she is potentially I don't want to use the word slut, but she is potentially not good because she wants to post a swimsuit photo of herself.
Exactly. And this is something that people with narcissistic tendencies do. And especially like the spiritual narcissists or like the woke, I've been to therapy, so now they use it as a way to like gaslight and manipulate and make you feel like you're in the wrong. And it's like, no. Okay, you can have your standards or whatever, but you don't get to like devalue someone and like, do all those things and then say my opinion's right because I went to therapy or whatever. That's not how life works. But they love to do that.
But if you're his therapist, you read this and you're like, whoa, Jonah, what? Like, I mean, like, I wonder if he was shocked reading this stuff. He's like, no. Or if he encourages this behavior.
Oh, I'm sure he didn't tell the therapist that. And, when he did that documentary with,
Stutz. It's called Stutz, I think, on Netflix. Yeah.
I couldn't even watch it because I could feel like how disingenuous he was. And because everyone's like, oh, because of my
therapist or Jonah?
Jonah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was just like, this guy, I'm like, oh, and I just knew something like this was going to come out. And someone did, because my friends were like, oh, just keep watching it. I'm like, I'm allergic to it because he is being so disingenuous right now and trying to make himself look a certain way. I had this whole thing like laid out about, I think that he has narcissistic tendencies, and everyone was like, oh, and then the text came out. I was like, I was right, because it's like, I don't see any real, I think he was trying, but I also think to do a documentary, it's like, look, I'm doing therapy. Look how I'm just so, no, you're not.
Yeah, because then you read those texts and you're like, we all immediately like go, oh, dude, like this is bad news. Like this is how you're like treating, and in a way you're like, he thinks, I don't know what he thinks, but he thinks he's doing the right thing of protecting himself. And I always empathize with anybody that goes through obviously what he's gone through in terms of body image, because he has been, I've gone through like yo-yo weighting all my life in terms of weight. And I will always, no matter if I'm in a skinnier phase or not, I will always see myself at my heaviest that I've ever, it's never going to, I've not been able to break my mind of that. And so I do empathize with Jonah of like, potentially that really does screw you up. I don't know. Like, I maybe that's just me making excuses for him because it doesn't excuse this. But I do wonder how this man walks through the world, seeing himself in like a certain way, especially projected on a huge screen. And I don't know. Like, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but I just think there's like a lot of shit that he's probably had to work on through the years.
Oh, absolutely. And do you mean like seeing this like out in the world, and then like?
Just like when you completely change your body type multiple times in your life, that means you're obviously not wanting to be at your heaviest or however, you don't want, that does not make you happy. And we see that because he gets down to like I just saw a picture of him yesterday and he's at this just really the skinniest I've ever seen him, where I'm just like, oh my God, it's getting weirdly dangerous. But he obviously does. I don't know. Like there's just so much in there psychologically for me that he must go through on a daily basis, because he doesn't want to be that person. He wants to be the skinny person, but then he also goes to so much therapy. Like, is there a chance that sometimes we do too much therapy where we actually lose the ability to appreciate what therapy is and what we need to do with our lives?
Well, yeah. And then, with the first thing that you said, he could be it sounds like he's using food and maybe some type of eating disorder to cope. It's very normal to go into maybe anorexic tendencies when, you're trying to cope, or over focus on food or your body to numb out or cope. That could be just what he's doing right now. And then the other thing is yes, I'm a big, this is why another reason I stopped doing traditional therapy and I coach. is because like you can't just intellectualize things. You could, in therapy, it could just get very cognitive. It could just be like, yes, we have to start with the awareness. But if you just stay there, and I think that a lot of narcissists do that, they stay in that space of like, oh, I know everything now. I know this, I know that about myself. And so, no, you have to integrate it. Like you have to bring your head and heart together. You have to like change literally like on a cellular level and like create new neural pathways. The neural pathways are still the same. If you're like, basically, let's say I'm a dick. Oh yes, now I'm aware I'm a dick. Okay, great. Awareness is the first step, but then we have to do different behaviors. We have to change like on a fundamental level. We have to, in a lot of ways become like a new person where we have different reactions to things. We see the world, a big part of healing is a change in perspective. It's a complete change in perspective. I love when my clients are like, oh my God, that thing that would trigger me, I just don't even, it's not there. It does not exist anymore. Or like the insomnia I used to have, or the binge eating, it's like it just went away. And it's like, no, you actually did the work to integrate these tools, this awareness, and then the tools that you utilize, once you have the awareness. That's integration. And so, yeah, you can totally over therapize yourself. I think that some therapists are fine monopolizing on that. It's like, yeah. And so that's why I'm just kind of like, I have like very strong opinions about that. But yeah, I think that you can intellectualize things to death and get nowhere.
You seem like you're a glass half full kind of person, even with all the behavior that you know. And I talk about myself or joke about myself all the time, like I'm a glass half empty kind of person. But I will say the half empty glass, it's filled with some pretty good stuff. But I always lately, especially, I just have a negative view. And like, I was talking about grief, and I lost my dog last week, and my mom's on her final, she's on her final battle with cancer, and it's not, we're dealing with, a matter of a month or something, I would imagine. And I stayed there for the last 3 weeks, and it's so, that kind of stuff will really like it paralyzed me in some ways. Like and I'm a big guy on this tiny bed in a guest room. And I would, even yesterday, I was like, I woke up happy and I was doing some happy. I interviewed somebody and that made me happy. And then I got into this weird, I didn't have a specific thought, got into this weird mind funk, and I couldn't get out of it. I kept waiting to snap out of it. And I know we're supposed to let ourselves feel how we feel, but it just seems like so much. Like, besides therapy, like what are things that we can do? Because a lot of people experience grief. A lot of people deal with just horrendous things. What are steps besides, obviously therapy and speaking with someone? I feel like this podcast sometimes is just great to be able to talk to somebody else, because in my normal environment, I push people away a lot of the times, and I want to be still and by myself. What are things that I could be doing or we could be doing? And I know this is not pop culture related, but it could be.
Well, okay. What you just said, that's great awareness that you tend to isolate when you are going through something hard. So knowing that you isolate and then reaching out, you could give me a call and I'll call you and help. Like, and man, I don't even know if it's like cheering you up, but I would totally chat, like seriously. So you have to do something that's often called contrary action. So when for you, it would be to not isolate, maybe to go for a walk or connect with a friend. And then that would be like healing. And that is the thing about grief though, Ryan, is that it's not linear. Like all the stages of grief, you could go from like denial to acceptance to bargaining to, I think all the things, they're not like linear, so these things like come and go, and there was, and like all emotions are energy in motion. So none of them last, but they can get stuck in your body if they're not acknowledged. Kind of like what happened with Chloe and the cancer on her cheek. Like, I think that, I know, like, and it's been scientifically proven now, like that we have, like, your brain doesn't stop in your head. Like, you have a brain stem that goes all the way down into your nervous system. So emotions that you suppress, like, end up in your body somewhere, and they can turn to cancer or illness. And so we have to, the word express means to press out. We have to release these, even if they're uncomfortable feelings, get them out of your body. And so sometimes you just have to ask yourself, like, what's going to work today? Do I just need to get on the phone and freaking cry? Or do I need to like comfort myself? Do I need to, and this is sometimes like inner child work comes in. It's like, okay, well, what part of me or my younger self feels wounded? How can I take care of myself? Do I need to give myself a hug? Like literally going like this actually like releases oxytocin. And sometimes we just need to do that, like, and then breathing deeply. So there's so many tools. You have to kind of like know yourself and ask yourself. One, be aware of like what's going on. Okay, I'm feeling this way. What's my default behavior? Oh, it's to isolate. Let me try something different, even though I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, you don't want to do the things. That's the other thing. You have no desire to do the thing that you know is probably the thing that would. It's like just this weird no desire. You know, you're like, nope, I would just rather sit and lay, like it's like, you're not even having specific thoughts. It's like a general malaise and an overall thing that you sometimes, like you could do this, but you choose not to do that to pull yourself out of it. It's weird. You obviously know. Yeah.
I mean, the brain is resistant to change. Especially the more primitive parts of our brain are resistant to change because it's like associated with like safety and it not being safe. But this part, the prefrontal cortex, the more developed part of your brain knows that, hey, this is a new behavior that's good. So they're kind of like fighting each other sometimes. So so that's what's happening when we go into old default behaviors, because maybe when you were little, it did work to hide under the covers. And that was like the only, when you're little, like you don't have a lot of tools. So to hide under the covers or numb out with a video game or whatever, that was the best thing for you to do when you were that age. But as an adult, you have this expansive amount of resources, but you don't use them because that old primitive part of your brain is like, just hide. Remember when that worked? Just keep doing that. You know what I mean?
And then it's scary because then I was like, okay, like I tried to drink and it was like, okay, that doesn't actually do anything. It's like not doing anything. I tried to eat, which usually works. That didn't do anything. And I remember try to watch Real Housewives of Orange County last week. And I was like, this ain't hitting for me. Like usually that's the thing. I'm like, mother effer, this isn't working. I can't get into this show because my mind is not letting me. And that was the scary part where you're like, any of these things, they're not like these little buttons are not working to like numb.
That is wonderful. Like when you say that, I'm like so happy. I'm like, that means you're growing. And that means your willingness to actually feel what's going on is expanding. And I'm like, I'm so happy you can't get it up for your
people are like, I can't get into it either because it sucks this season. Actually, Orange County is good this season, but it is something, those things that you used to rely on, if they're not working for this, and that's scary because you're like, you're pushing against it and your body is always tense because you're in anticipation of the final shoe dropping. You're pre-grieving something and you're, even though you can't imagine what it's actually going to be, your body is going through these things, or that's what I feel like. So I'm in this constant state of tense, of like, just wait, like you're about to get hit or something,
And that's where the acceptance piece comes in. And acceptance is so deep, of like really accepting what is, because any form of addiction or numbing out is like an inability or an unwillingness to tolerate the present moment. You could sum all addiction into that, the inability or just not being able to like tolerate the present moment. So the opposite of that is acceptance. So if we could be like, okay, this is happening, or you rehearse it. Okay, when this happens, when this relationship ends, or when this person dies, it's like, okay, everyone's going to be okay. This is, if you have a higher power, this is, my higher power doing their plan, and I don't need to interfere with it. I don't need to have all of this resistance to something that is just part of the plan. There's so many ways like that you can incorporate acceptance into your daily life all the time. It's like, I could be happy about the sun shining right now, or I could be bummed out because I want it to be but why don't I focus on the fact that it's sunny out and think of all the things I could be grateful for that. And even with like breakups or something tragic, I'm like, think about something that you're grateful for the situation. Like, like dig deep, because people are usually like, bitch, what? And I'm like, no, seriously, like, what can you be grateful for right now in this moment? And for like the future moment or whatever, like, where's the gratitude? Where is, all of that? But acceptance and gratitude go a long way.
That's something you really have to train yourself. I do this journal every morning, like 3 things you're grateful for. It's like a quick, thing that you do every day. I do, and sometimes in my mind, I'm like, coffee. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I'm sitting there, and it's like, well, there are tons of things to be great. I can think of tons of things when I'm talking to you, but when you're alone by yourself, sometimes your mind is like, well, I don't fucking know. Like, do I put breathing again? Like, it is that interesting thing of really trying to realize. I don't know. I'm realizing as I'm speaking to you. So in fact, I think I owe you money now, Lauren.
No.
But no, it's just very interesting. And, the numbing of these situations or trying to, but that's why I was just trying to think about like terms of reality shows and pop culture things, as we can use as a language, like anything else of people grieving in the public, whether it's grieving a relationship, breaking out of a toxic relationship, going into one, and the people that are doing the work, because it looks like somebody like Kim, whether you love her or hate her, is trying to do some sort of work on herself in regards to that relationship, right?
Yeah, I mean, she also being a workaholic. So, I mean, I think that she's using her addiction in that way because it really does feel like she's just like in work mode and kind of like keep going forward mode. And she mentioned that before, like something happened, like like when her dad died, and it was like, okay, I'll do the funeral speech, and it's like just keep moving forward type of thing.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how much she's like feeling, everything that she needs to feel. It feels like to me that Kim and Chloe especially have a hard time like feeling their feelings or just emoting, or like they can, especially Chloe can do that for other people and be very nurturing and there for some, but like she has like this avoidant type of thing, or hyper independent thing, where it's kind of like I want closeness, but then I can't handle too much like closeness. It's too
I'm really curious to see where Chloe goes, especially, and if the Tristan thing, because if you're not putting yourself around other people, Tristan's the only man there half the time. Of course, like, how would that not end up being romantic at some point down the line if he's the only man she's really around besides like employees?
Exactly.
Well, Lauren, you need to be a guy. You already are a recurring guest, but my gosh, I love these conversations so much. What are you doing right now? Like, how do we support you? How do we work with you if we want to do that? Like, what is the process of the work you do? How do we find out more about you? I know we had said the website and the Instagram earlier, but what are you working on?
So the things I'm working on, I launched my course about imposter syndrome, and I'm adding more modules to that. I called it Imposter No More. In case you don't know what imposter syndrome is, it's like this overwhelming feeling of like that especially the more success you have, that you're like a fraud, and there's just all this anxiety about your ability and your skills and abilities. I put a course together about that, and if you do happen to take the course or buy the course, like connect with me if you have any questions, because I love hearing from you guys, and and that's why I'm adding more modules. And then I'm, like I was saying before, I'm launching a course on recovering from narcissistic abuse and being in a narcissistic relationship, whether it's a parent or ex lover, whatever. So I'm doing that, and I'm putting a wait list together for that, and then we'll launch it next month, and I'm really excited about it. But if you're interested, like, in my best way really to get a hold of me is through Instagram. So DM me if you want access to those courses. DM me about the narcissistic abuse one for sure. And then the other one is in my link, like the link in my bio. Yeah. So
do you ever work with narcissistic people that are in a narcissistic relationship and trying to recover from that, but are still in the narcissistic relationship that don't want to leave it, but are like, I just want to learn how to deal with it?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not easy leaving people like that. It's really not. It's a process, and sometimes a long one. So, yeah.
But if they're trying to work on themselves while they're still in it, I mean, they can still be with them and not, I mean, is that the final step of the work, is like, you have to get away with it? Or can people learn to live and love in a narcissistic relationship and be healthy in any?
I've seen both. I've seen both happen, where they want to stay and they need a lot of coping skills. And I've seen people where it's like a bridge, and that's often been the case with me. It's like, I'm here and I need this coaching to bridge me and get me to the other side, because it's just, I mean, they break you down so much and you question yourself so much. You really do need a lot of support.
Wow, this is amazing. You're amazing. I cannot wait for our next conversation already. Lauren Clayton, all her information is in the show notes. Go check her out. Go follow her on Instagram. And I thank you so much for your time. It's always amazing.
Welcome. Thanks, Ryan. So good to see you. This was fun.